Somaliland, officially the Republic of Somaliland, is a self-declared state in the Horn of Africa. It is located in the southern coast of the Gulf of Aden and bordered by Djibouti to the northwest, Ethiopia to the south and west, and Somalia to the east. Its claimed territory has an area of 176,120 square kilometers, 68,000 square miles, with approximately 6.2 million people as of 2024. The capital and largest city is Hargeysa. Various Somali Muslim kingdoms were established in the area during the early Islamic period, including in the 14th to 15th centuries the Zila-based Adal Sultanate. In the early modern period, successor states to the Adal Sultanate emerged, including the Isaaq Sultanate, which was established in the middle of the 18th century. In the late 19th century, the United Kingdom signed agreements with various clans in the area, establishing the Somaliland Protectorate, which was formally granted independence by the United Kingdom as the State of Somaliland on June 26, 1960. 5 days later, the State of Somaliland voluntarily united with the Trust Territory of Somalia, the former Italian Somalia, to form the Somali Republic. The union of the two states proved problematic early on, and in response to the harsh policies enacted by Somalia's Bar regime against the main clan family in Somaliland, the Isaaq, shortly after the conclusion of the disastrous Ogaden War, a 10-year war of independence concluded with the declaration of Somaliland's independence in 1991. The government of Somaliland regards itself as the successor state to British Somaliland. Since 1991, the territory has been governed by democratically elected governments that seek international recognition as the government of the Republic of Somaliland. The central government maintains informal ties with some foreign governments, who have sent delegations to Hargeysa. Somaliland hosts representative offices from several countries, including Ethiopia and Taiwan. However, as of 2010, Somaliland's self-proclaimed independence had not been officially recognized by any UN member state or international organization. It is the largest unrecognized state in the world by de facto controlled land area. It is a member of the Unrepresented Nations and Peoples Organization, an advocacy group whose members consist of indigenous peoples, minorities, and unrecognized or occupied territories. Following the Las Anod conflict that emerged in 2022, Somaliland lost control of a significant portion of its eastern territory to pro-unionist forces who established the SSC Katumo administration. Somaliland has an ancient history and civilization. For a long period in the past, Somaliland had well-established trade links with the rest of the world, particularly ancient Egypt, the Pharaohs, the Romans, the Arabian Peninsula and the Indian subcontinent. Commodities like hides and skins, frankincense and myrrh, ivory, gums, feathers were traded in exchange for consumer products such as sugar, tea, dates, clothes, etc. It was uniquely the hub of spices trade, frankincense and myrrh. The trade links to the Middle East and East Asia existed via the Red Sea and the Indian Ocean routes. The Republic of Somaliland is located in the Horn of Africa. It has the Gulf of Aden to the north and shares borders with Djibouti in the west, Ethiopia in the south and Somalia in the east. It has an area of 176,119 square kilometers and a coastal line which stretches up to 800 kilometers along the Red Sea. In terms of area, it would have ranked 37th in Africa, which means there are 18 countries with smaller areas than Somaliland in the continent. It is home to a population of 4 million. The capital, Hargeysa, is a metropolis with an estimated population of over 1 million. The national language is Somali, but both English and Arabic are widely spoken. Somaliland, due to its strategic location near Bab el-Mandeb, at the entrance to Gulf of Aden and the Red Sea, has always been of interest for strategic and commercial reasons. In the mid-16th century, the Great Ottoman Empire annexed the port of Zila and provided protection, at a cost collected through customs and other charges, for Arab, Persian and Indian merchants who serviced the trade requirements of the surrounding area and the Abyssinian hinterland. In 1870 the ambitious Khedive Ismail I of Egypt, whose country was nominally part of the Ottoman Empire, obtained the Ottoman Sultan's authorized rights over Zila in exchange for paying an annual fee of sterling £18,000. The Khedive in due time acquired the coast between Bulhar and Berbera without reference to the Sultan. In 1877 Britain signed a convention recognizing the Khedival annexation of all the East African coast north of Ras Hafun, the promontory of land jutting out into the Indian Ocean south of Cape Gardefwy. The agreement stipulated that no portion of this area should be ceded to any foreign power and that British consular agents should be appointed at places on the coast. The Sultan of Turkey, hitherto not very interested in any land east of Zila, generating, however, a piqued interest of the Ottoman Empire. As Egypt had opened the Suez Canal in 1869, Egyptian interest shifted more on the coastline rather than the interior. At coastal locations lighthouses, harbors, piers, blockhouses, and barracks were constructed, and running water supplies engineered. Some of these facilities have lasted until recently. In 1884 Egypt was facing the Mahdiist revolt in the Sudan and for financial reasons, dictated by Britain, had to curtail its projects along the Somaliland coast. By agreement with Britain the Egyptian flag remained flying in Somaliland, but Egyptian troops and officials were withdrawn and replaced by very few British troops, ships, and officials from Aden. With the departure of the Egyptians and the possibility that other colonial powers had their eyes trained on the potentials of the Somaliland coasts and its hinterland, Britain had to act fast. The British Colonial Office expedited Major A. Hunt of Great, representing his government, to draw up protection treaties with several Somaliland clans. Britain wooed Somaliland clan leaders with a promise of protection, guaranteeing them full support in case of an attack from other neighboring territories, which were then occupied by other Europeans. See the map of Africa by treaty written by Sir E. Hertzlet. On their part, the clan elders of the day refused to grant the British the right to land unless they agreed to their terms. Somaliland has been a self-governing region of Somalia for more than 3 decades, but its claim of independence is not recognized by Mogadishu or any foreign government. While this has limited Somaliland's access to international markets, it has not prevented the breakaway state from making steady democratic gains. Some analysts say Somaliland, which has a distinct history and remains more stable than the rest of Somalia, has a strong case for independence. Others fear that international recognition would encourage other secessionist movements in Africa. In recent years, Somaliland has unilaterally struck major port investment deals with foreign powers, including Ethiopia and the United Arab Emirates, UAE, raising tensions with Somalia and further provoking friction in the broader Horn of Africa region. Related. Where is Somaliland? Somaliland is part of Somalia and the larger Horn of Africa region. It has hundreds of miles of coastline along the Gulf of Aden to the north, and it borders Ethiopia to the south and west and Djibouti to the northwest. Puntland, a semi-autonomous state of Somalia that lies due east, disputes some of Somaliland's territorial claims. What is its political status? Somaliland broke ties with Somalia's government in Mogadishu after declaring independence in 1991, and the region has sought international recognition as an independent state since then. No foreign government recognizes its sovereignty, but many effectively acknowledge Somaliland as separate from Somalia. It has held several peaceful democratic elections since 2003. The United States, France, the United Kingdom, and the European Union, EU, sent delegations to observe Somaliland's 2017 presidential election. The territory's 2024 electoral contest was one of only 5 elections in Africa that voted in an opposition party, called Wadani, and enjoyed a peaceful vote. How did it get here? Somaliland's history as a distinct region of Somalia dates back to the late 19th century. The territory was a British protectorate until 1960 when it unified with the rest of present-day Somalia, which had been under Italian rule. The merger faced challenges early on, with many in Somaliland rejecting the centralization of power in the country's south. A rebel group, the Somali National Movement, SNM, emerged in Somaliland in the 1980s opposing the military junta of President Siad Barre, which seized power in 1969. In January 1991, SNM and other insurgent groups ousted Barre, whose forces had killed tens of thousands of Somalilanders and destroyed much of the region's infrastructure. SNM refused to recognize an interim government led by another militia group, and in May it declared Somaliland's independence, with the city of Hargeysa as its capital. Delegates took a decade to thrash out a new constitution for Somaliland, which voters overwhelmingly approved in 2001. The referendum saw a transition from a power-sharing agreement among leading clans to a multi-party democracy. Although some international observers applauded the peaceful vote, no government recognized the process. What is Somaliland's case for independence? The Somaliland government asserts that it meets most of the requirements of a sovereign democratic state, it holds free and fair elections, has its own currency and security forces, and issues its own passports. It also says that its independence claim is consistent with a long-standing norm of the African Union and its predecessor that colonial-era borders should be maintained. Some analysts also note that Somalilanders are predominantly from the Isaaq clan, and thus ethnically distinctive from other Somalis. The territory has widely been seen as an oasis for stability in a turbulent region. From the Somalilanders' perspective, they have a completely reasonable argument, Bronwyn Bruton, democracy and governance expert, said in 2018. Somaliland is trying to break off from Somalia, which hasn't been a functioning country in decades. In 2024, democracy and civil liberties watchdog Freedom House rated Somaliland as partly free, scoring a 43 out of 100, while Somalia got only 8 in the same year and unequivocally not free status. However, Somaliland's score declined following government crackdowns on those protesting Parliament's decision to postpone the 2022 presidential election. After its peaceful 2024 election, however, several experts and diplomats noted that the territory is one of the most stable democracies in the region. What is its financial situation? A weak economy and limited opportunities for foreign trade and investment have stifled the government's capacity to provide services to its approximately 6 million citizens. The Somaliland government reported a gross domestic product, GDP, of roughly $7 billion in 2022, most of which it receives in remittances from Somalilanders working abroad. The region's unemployment remains very high, particularly for youth, and officials worry about a potential brain drain phenomenon, with educated people migrating in search of opportunities elsewhere. Its main exports are livestock and animal products, which it ships to neighboring Djibouti and Ethiopia, as well as to Gulf states, such as Saudi Arabia and Oman. Its GDP per capita, just around $1,500, is one of the lowest in the world, although still almost threefold more than Somalia. The government is ineligible for loans from the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund as long as Somaliland is not an internationally recognized state or reconciled with Somalia. President Muse Bihi Abdi, in an op-ed after his 2017 election victory, said that Somaliland's exclusion from international markets compounds the socio-economic pressures that Somaliland faces, and analysts say that an anemic economy puts decades of political progress at risk. Current President Abdirahman Mohamed Abdullahi, commonly known as Iro, made economic reform a central tenet of his 2024 campaign. Somaliland has nonetheless negotiated its own foreign investment deals despite opposition from the federal government in Mogadishu. In 2016, it struck a landmark deal with DP World of Dubai, part of the UAE, to develop and manage the port of Berbera, a joint venture expected to produce millions of dollars of income a year for Somaliland. Landlocked Ethiopia joined the port development project 2 years later, aiming to expand its access to the sea. In January 2024, Somaliland sparked another diplomatic row with Somalia when it agreed to lease Ethiopia rights to roughly 12 miles, 32 kilometers, of coastline and access to Berbera for commercial and military purposes for 50 years in exchange for its formal recognition and part ownership of Ethiopia Airlines, the national carrier. Where do negotiations between Somalia and Somaliland stand? Mogadishu continues to reject Somaliland's call for independence and strongly condemns its unilateral attempts to negotiate major international agreements. However, Somaliland remains steadfast in its ambitions. In December 2023, Somalia announced that the country was ready to reopen talks with Somaliland to resolve their disputes, under mediation by neighboring Djibouti. The following week, Somaliland struck its provisional deal with Ethiopia on the port of Berbera. The agreement prompted swift backlash from Somalia, which called it an illegal act of aggression and recalled its ambassador to Ethiopia. Somalia and Ethiopia remained at odds over the deal for all of 2024 until Turkey-mediated talks thawed tensions between the two. Despite Somalia and Ethiopia since restoring diplomatic ties, the timeline for resuming Somaliland-Somalia talks remains unclear. Is there international support for Somaliland's independence? Many countries have encouraged the breakaway state's elections and economic development, but none have recognized Somaliland. While some experts see historical and geopolitical reasons for countries such as Ethiopia and Kenya to take this step, others say the African Union, would have to be the first to do so. The United States and the UN and all of their allies have worked hard to try to build up the and position it as a moral authority, says Bruton. The bloc, however, has feared that formal recognition would embolden other secessionist movements on the continent, such as Nigeria's Biafra or Morocco's Western Sahara, to demand the same. Since the creation of a continental bloc in 1963, there have only been two widely recognized border changes in Africa: Eritrea's split from Ethiopia in 1993 and South Sudan's independence in 2011. In the fallout of Somaliland's January 2024 tentative port deal with Ethiopia, several countries and blocs such as the United States, Egypt, and EU called for calm in the region and for Somalia's sovereignty to be respected. What is Somaliland's strategic importance? Somaliland is positioned along the Gulf of Aden near the entrance to the Bab al-Mandeb Strait, a major sea lane through which almost one-third of the world's shipping passes. Its coastline has made it and neighboring Eritrea and Djibouti attractive partners for foreign governments looking for sea access and a maritime presence in the region. Djibouti has become a hub for foreign military bases. China, France, Italy, Japan, and the United States all have facilities in the country. Major foreign powers, including China, Russia, and the UAE, have also increasingly courted Eritrea. However, Somaliland will likely continue to struggle to build these types of relationships without broad international recognition or a compromise with Somalia, as illustrated by its controversial port investment deals. Diplomacy is also likely to be complicated by Somalia's ongoing battle against the Al-Shabaab Islamist insurgent group, as well as deteriorating security and stability in the broader Horn of Africa region. The Joe Biden administration's U.S. Special Envoy for the Horn of Africa said that the deal has been weaponized by Al-Shabaab to generate new recruits to undermine regional security. Countries such as nearby Ethiopia and Sudan are also suffering internal conflicts with spillover effects, and the region is regularly hammered by natural disasters and extreme weather exacerbated by climate change, including searing heat, historic droughts, and torrential floods that drive severe hunger. The rift between Ethiopia and Somalia over the port deal has also upset bilateral security efforts to fight Al-Shabaab, with Somalia renouncing the large contingent of Ethiopian troops in the unbacked peacekeeping force in the area. Ethiopia hasn't publicly said whether it has scrapped the Somaliland port deal yet, but has agreed under the Turkey-mediated talks to seek port access under Somalia's sovereignty. Somalia's ambassador to Ethiopia said that Addis Ababa has agreed to a one-door policy, meaning it would not engage with Somaliland without Somalia's permission. Thank you for watching this video.